In the 3rd century before Christ,
Qi, son of Yu, became emperor. The first dynasty of China was born. Dynasty followed dynasty, and emperor succeeded emperor, as China expanded until her borders stretched from Siberia to Burma and from Afghanistan to the Pacific, until her frontiers contained almost 1/4 of the human race. But the days of the emperors are no more. The age of dynasties has ended. For the 20th century after Christ has brought China revolution, invasion, civil war, and communism. One of the basic principles of our democracy is that every citizen has the right to know what is going on, both here at home and in the world at large. Guided by this principle, when our nation's largest television network asked me to take films inside China, I decided to face whatever risks might be involved and accepted the assignment. During a 6-week trip, I traveled over 7,000 miles in this land which is larger than either the United States or Canada, and which is inhabited by almost 700 million people. The films I took there were airmailed back to New York before being developed. Not a single frame was censored or even seen by the communists. Was I able to learn the truth? The answer is both yes and no. China is so vast that not even a 45-day visit is enough to catch more than a glimpse of it. Also, without living in a country for years, even the most observant reporter cannot experience the daily joys and sorrows which are most important of all to the average man. Yet I was able to see many things. I filmed both new factories and severely primitive ways of doing things, both modern health techniques and crowded slums. And I saw both the gigantic campaign for peace and friendship and the equally gigantic campaign of anti-U.S. propaganda. We may dislike China's political system. We may fear the growing strength which science and industry are bringing to her. Some of us may even feel that the China of old, with her epidemics, famines, and civil strife, was preferable to the present-day communist giant which is challenging the West. Whatever our feelings about China may be, one thing is certain: we cannot afford to ignore her. There is an ancient Chinese saying that one picture is worth 1,000 words. You will now see the thousands of pictures that I saw inside Red China. The Great Wall, monument to the might of China's ancient rulers and to her people's engineering skills centuries before the road builders of Rome were born. Constructed 2,500 years ago to keep out the Huns, the wall is 1,684 miles in length. Like the splendor of her once all-powerful emperors, China's Great Wall fell into ruin. The rains washed out its foundations, and the poor peasants took its stones for their huts. Today, the Great Wall is being rebuilt. The communists are doing this both to show the world that China is once again a mighty power, and to try and convince the people that their leaders, rather than being foreign elements, are truly Chinese in spirit. With 100 pounds of brick strapped to their backs, they slowly trudge up the steep inclines. The more they carry, the more they are paid. Despite this being the latter half of the 20th century, the techniques used to rebuild the wall are much the same as those by which it was originally built before the birth of Christ. Winding its way across the Padaling Hills, 25 miles north of the capital city of Peking, the Great Wall remains the largest man-made construction on the face of the earth. The Temple of Heaven in Peking, built 500 years ago. Here the emperors offered sacrifices to the gods and prayed for a good harvest. These balconies are built of marble that was transported almost 2,000 miles from quarries near the Burmese border. Since 1911, when Sun Yat-sen, the George Washington of China, overthrew the empire, The royal temples and palaces have become public museums. Today, even the poorest coolie can gaze upon the beautiful architecture and relics of the past which were once seen only by kings. This one little tourist couldn't decide whether to smile or to frown. The pigtails that Chinese had to wear under the empire are long gone. Now European styles are common, and even t-shirts are popular. I started filming these soldiers practicing a goose-step-like march when their officers told me, "Please do not think we only have short pants. The Chinese army is not poor and has very nice uniforms." The Peking Children's Hospital was opened in 1956. Its assistant director, Dr. Wu, studied in Pennsylvania. For 600 beds, it has 500 nurses and 150 doctors, a very large staff even by the most modern standards. This, however, is a showplace and is not typical of hospitals throughout the country. The communists have promised that similar medical facilities will someday exist in every commune, a promise which, if ever fulfilled, will be a staggering achievement in a country known for having among the lowest health standards in the world. Having 5 nurses for every 6 patients provides very individual attention, especially at feeding time. There is a modern X-ray department. Tuberculosis and other pulmonary ailments are still quite a problem in China. When they first came to power, the communists thought of doing away with the traditional Chinese medicine that had been practiced for centuries. The folk treatments were so popular, however, that it was finally decided to keep them, and traditional medicine departments were set up inside the modern hospitals. Right next to the new X-ray machines, people are treated with techniques discovered before the Middle Ages. The centuries-old medicine called acupuncture consists of sticking tiny silver needles into the nerve centers under the skin. This 5-year-old girl suffers from paralysis of the face and hand. Her mother watches as she gets the acupuncture treatment. Although given no anesthetic, she shows hardly any pain, due to the great skill of the doctor administering the needles. There is very little scientific support for such practices in the West, but they are believed in quite strongly in China. By continuing to use them, the communist authorities get the peasants to come to the new hospitals, where they can usually be treated with more modern medicines when necessary. She appears none the worse for the acupuncture, although the afflicted area is still evident on her face. Careful records are being kept to see if there is any real value to these ancient treatments. The Peking Opera is the classic theater of China. It combines singing, dancing, acting, pantomime, and acrobatics. The crowd buys popsicles in the lobby to eat during the performance. When the Peking Opera visits London or Paris, people wear diamonds and furs. In Peking, however, it's an everyday event, and the audience dresses in a more, let's say, proletarian manner. This poster depicts some typical roles. The girdle around the waist symbolizes royalty, so the audience knows that this actor plays a king or a prince. Flags on the back show that one is a general, each flag representing an army. A black beard means a wise old man, and this costume indicates a female character, although often played by a male actor. Unlike our Western tradition of white symbolizing honesty or purity, in the Chinese theater, a patch of white makeup in the center of the face indicates dishonesty or foolishness, while black is the color of integrity. This actor plays the King of the Leopards. And these are his leopard soldiers, each of whom wears a different makeup design. The enemies of the leopards are the monkeys. These are the soldiers of the Monkey King. The Monkey King is a leading figure in Chinese folklore. A mischievous fellow, he often teases the gods and sometimes even defeats them in battle. The story of the magic axe takes us to the palace of a beautiful princess. The audience knows this to be a palace because the platform symbolizes a throne. The princess promised her father on his deathbed that she would carry his magic axe in defense of the kingdom should it ever be threatened. A foreign army is invading. The princess calls upon her people to be courageous. The general and prime minister, however, are frightened. They plead with the princess to give up, but she is true to the promise made to her father and insists on leading the army in defense of the nation. A red-bearded general arrives riding a make-believe horse. The tasseled stick he carries is the traditional symbol for a man on horseback. The generals confer, but too late. The enemy has arrived. Lo and behold, the invaders are led by a handsome young prince. He falls in love with the princess at first sight, and she falls in love with him. She uses her father's magic axe to conquer him. Then, instead of killing the prince, she marries him. They merge their kingdoms and live happily forever after. Chinese theater is subsidized and subject to censorship by the communist government. Typical of the communist influence on the theater is what happened to the Peking opera that used to be called Disturbances in Heaven, where the Monkey King teased the gods but was punished by them. Its title has been changed to Revolt in Heaven, and the Monkey King now rises up against the gods, and his revolution is victorious. At a reception in the Xinhua Peace Hotel are leading figures in Chinese science and politics. Among them is Dr. Xian Tzu Fen, former rocket expert from the California Institute of Technology, today director of the Institute of Mechanics in Peking. Ho Lung, the famous Red Army leader. The guest of honor, Zhou Enlai, China's premier and foreign minister. A leading communist ever since 1927, when he organized 600,000 workers and took over Shanghai. Zhou represents China at almost every international conference. At an interview, Zhou answers questions about China's foreign policy of the 1960s. He declares, "Formosa is ours. We will regain it whenever and by whatever means we choose." Leaving the seat of the State Council, Zhou Enlai goes to his Russian-built ZIS limousine and returns to his duties as one of China's highest leaders. North from Peking to Manchuria, China's oldest center of heavy industry. Modern docks were built in Dairen by Japan as part of her exploitation of Manchuria's coal and iron deposits. The entrance to the harbor is adorned with an oil painting of Mao Zedong, chairman of the Communist Party. Destroyed by the Japanese when they retreated at the end of World War II, the dock facilities were rebuilt by the Russians, who finally returned this important port to China a few years later. Most of the ships in dock are from the various communist countries. The Russian freighter Amderma, with its name in Russian, English, and Chinese. This old lifeboat is named Vladivostok, after the Siberian port. These men are Russian technicians assisting the Chinese in operating the harbor. The number of Soviet engineers in China is diminishing as the Chinese themselves learn the necessary skills. Despite the modern machinery, a lot of work on the waterfront is still done by coolies using primitive techniques. In the adjoining shipyards, vessels as large as 10,000 tons are being built. Much of the work being done by hand here would be done by machine in an American shipyard. Despite having to use some backward techniques, they appear to be turning out quite seaworthy vessels. At the exit gate, an old riveter proudly shows how his pipe works, which seems to be a standing joke among his friends. The Dairen Locomotive Works is a typical example of the help China is receiving from the more technically advanced communist countries. A movement called the Great Leap Forward has been started. Billions of dollars in Russian help, plus the most sweeping campaign to build heavy industry ever mounted in any nation, have already produced significant results. Economists in the West are predicting that within less than 10 years, China will become the third industrial power in the world, ranking only after the United States and Russia. The Dairen and Port Arthur Workers' Sea Resort has a pebble beach similar to those along the French Riviera, and is complete with bathing beauties, although these are a bit shy of the sun. This is a weekday, yet the beach is fairly crowded, but that doesn't mean there are lots of people in China with free time. The workers each have a different day off in order to keep the factories going without a halt, and the parks and beaches are therefore used by some people every day of the week. The erhu is a fiddle with a snakeskin drumhead. Harmonizing with it is a new Russian-built accordion. Out in the bay are picturesque little islands. Over the horizon lies Korea, where, a decade ago, Americans and Chinese were locked in mortal combat. Changchun, site of China's first and largest truck factory. Opened with Russian aid in 1956, it has 18,000 workers and is planned to produce 100,000 4.5-ton trucks per year. Using machines like this Russian-supplied automatic engine block grinder, the Chinese are going from primitive blacksmith shops to modern factories in a few years, a transition which other industrial nations took many generations to achieve. This rapid transformation is not without its problems. The lack of trained administrators and improper organization have caused many errors, and the new factory workers sometimes have to be taken from their machines and sent out to combat the droughts and floods that still ravage China. Despite the complete embargo by the U.S. government against trade with China, new American-made machines are in use. This one is from Rochester, New York. When asked where they get such things, the Chinese reply, "There is a big store where, if you have enough money, you can buy anything you want." These U.S. machines are probably purchased indirectly through Hong Kong, Canada, England, West Germany, or other nations which openly trade with China. South of Peking to Wuhan on the Yangtze River. The Yangtze is to China what the Mississippi is to the USA, a mighty river over 2,000 miles in length, which drains the central third of the nation. For the first time in Chinese history, bridges have been built over the Yangtze's raging waters. The first bridge completed was this one at Wuhan. The Wuhan Bridge is over 1 mile long and has 2 rail lines on its lower level and 6 auto lanes on its upper section. Traditional decor is interwoven with the steel and concrete construction. Despite this bridge being based upon modern engineering principles, most of the finishing work on it uses primitive means. Hot asphalt for the roadway is carried with a bamboo shoulder pole. The very foundations of the bridge rise up out of bamboo scaffolding to a height of 320 feet over the river. In the past, all trains going from the north to the south of China had to stop on the banks of the Yangtze and be floated across, car by car, on ferry boats. In times of storm or flood, the nation's rail system was cut in half. Today, trains like this one can travel the 11,000 miles from Canton across Siberia to Paris, a very important accomplishment from both an industrial and military point of view. The flag of China flies over the steamers that ply the Yangtze. According to a popular version, the large star represents the Communist Party, while the 4 small stars stand for the workers, peasants, intellectuals, and cooperative capitalists, meaning those businessmen who are cooperating with the communists, of course. From Wuhan, it is 2 days by boat to Chiang Kai-shek's former capital at Nanking. For centuries, the emperors of China tried to control its many rivers, and today's communist leaders are pressing the construction of dams and power generating stations. Until the rivers are finally tamed and harnessed, the ancient specter of flood will continue to haunt China. In Nanking, American Plymouths are widely used by the communists. Signs on their grills say Montage Suisse, assembled in Switzerland. Nanking University was originally built by British and American missionaries. Today, all foreign missionaries are forbidden in China, although the small number of Christians there are allowed to have native Chinese reverends and priests. In the university library are the latest technical and medical books from the West. This one was published by the U.S. Navy Department only a few months before getting here. Such titles as Applied Atomic Energy and Ionospheric Radio Propagation show that, while Americans may know very little about events in China, Chinese students are kept up on the latest scientific developments in the USA. Here, as in the other communist states, all education is paid for and controlled by the government. Although admissions to the universities are determined by very stiff examinations, they are filled to their limits. In the new dormitories at Nanking University, 10 men are crammed into a 10 by 15 foot room. Many of them work as manual laborers during their vacations to build new dormitories for the thousands of students still waiting to be admitted. The women's dormitories are a bit more spacious. Only 8 people must sleep and study in a 10 by 15 foot room. Shanghai, 4th largest city in the world, almost as large as New York, a metropolis of 8 million inhabitants. The famous Shanghai Bund, a waterfront district of formerly foreign-owned skyscrapers. From this customs building, Englishmen once controlled all of the goods entering or leaving Shanghai. This used to be the Bank of Formosa. It has been closed since 1949, when the communists came to power. But the scars where the brass letters were torn off of its facade are still visible. Taiwan is the Chinese name for Formosa. Traffic along the Bund is rather sparse these days compared to pre-communist times. The thousands of foreign businessmen and servicemen who once thronged here all fled in the face of the Red Army's advance. And the many streetwalkers who once made Shanghai the most notorious port in the world have all been re-educated by the communists. Today, the Shanghai Bund is just another cleaned-up, workaday thoroughfare in China. Traffic in Shanghai is largely by pedicab, a bicycle front being used to pull passengers riding in a two-wheeled cart. It has replaced the old hand-pulled rickshaw. Freight is also moved by pedicab, and those workers who don't have pedicabs must move the cargo as best they can. These primitive techniques existed in China long before Marx, Engels, or Mao Zedong. Today, along with modern machines, every type of manual labor is being used to try and make the communist plans work. China may be changing, but it is still a land of great contrasts. To many of us, the factories being built by the communists in China may not seem especially impressive. Taking our cars and television sets for granted, we forget that what for us is commonplace has never existed for the poverty-stricken masses of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. People who have known nothing but famine and disease find a system which puts modern tools in their hands difficult to question, no matter what ideological demands it may make. Despite this, many Americans feel that the material progress of China under communism is costing too much in spiritual values, that the conflict between age-old Chinese traditions and the new way of life must end in a revolution destroying the Peking regime. On the other hand, a growing number of our allies, led by England, are becoming convinced that the communists are going to be running China for a long time to come. Whatever the future may bring, forces have been set in motion which cannot be halted. The communists have promised the Chinese people that the sacrifices demanded of them today will create a veritable utopia for their children tomorrow. The China of emperors and warlords is no more. The sleeping dragon has been prodded awake, and the communists know that they must make good on their promises if they wish to remain the dragon's masters. These beautiful prints are the works of Qipa Shi, China's most famous painter of the 20th century. He died recently at the age of 97. Qipa Shi specialized in compositions involving flowers, insects, small animals, and other themes dear to the Chinese peasants. This type of illustrative poster is widely seen in China today. It depicts an ancient battle where peasants rose up and drove wicked landlords out of a walled city. The communists constantly remind people of the many peasant uprisings that did occur in China's history. The landlords fleeing in terror are likened to Chiang Kai-shek's forces thrown out of China by the Reds, while the heroic peasants in pursuit are compared to the communist army that took power in 1949. Individual heroism is also extolled in these posters. This hero is reputed to have strangled a tiger with his bare hands on the shore of the West Lake 800 years ago. His modern-day counterpart, the jet pilot. The caption on this poster declares, "The Iron Eagle of the skies rises to defend his motherland." And the parachutist next to him is urged, "Be skilled in your profession." The anti-aircraft gunner is told, "Be on guard. Keep your guns pointed at the sky, together with China's all-jet air force ever vigilant, for an evil enemy lurks overhead." And who is this enemy? Why, the United States, of course. This typical anti-American propaganda poster says, "American militarists want war, but they are stuck in the mud being crowed at while all the other nations in the world want peace," a proposition that few Americans would agree with. This anti-US poster is captioned, "In communist nations, wire and electricity are for peace. In capitalist America, there is only electrified barbed wire." In direct contrast to the flood of anti-American propaganda was the greeting given to a group of young Americans who visited China back in 1957. A crowd of 3,000 Chinese students met them at the Peking railway station with applause and bouquets of flowers. But at the same time a friendly face is turned towards American visitors, the Chinese people are told to seize reactionaries and saboteurs. This vile-looking fellow holds a hand grenade, wears radio earphones for illegal contact with the West, has a dagger in his hand and a pistol in his belt, a Chiang Kai-shek sun on his t-shirt, and the letters US in its center, meaning the United States. The Chinese people are told that, if they follow the plans of their communist leaders, together with the other socialist nations, they will blossom like the flowers. But there are still problems. Save every grain of wheat. It represents man's work. Men and women must work together to fulfill the goals of the 5-year plan. The use of Arabic numerals is part of an attempt to modernize China's antiquated language and writing systems. This poster declares, "Under communism, all the children of the world will grow up in peace." The Chinese baby wears the hairstyle traditionally used on healthy male infants. In the background is Picasso's famous Peace Dove. This is the Pan Family Bay district near Soochow Creek in Shanghai, a typical slum area. The people used to throw their garbage into the creek and then get their drinking water out of it, a very unhealthy practice indeed. The communists claim to have eliminated most of the disease that once ravaged this area. There are still people roaming around, however, like this old fellow I saw, who appeared to be suffering from trachoma. What did the communists do? First of all, they paved the muddy streets. Then they put electric lights in all the tenements and brought in clean water through a few hundred yards of lead piping. Finally, they set up a simple maternity clinic. These very elementary reforms had an unusually dramatic effect. The infant mortality rate fell from 35 deaths for every 100 births to only 4 deaths for every 100 children born. I ask why the children keep laughing at me, And I'm told that since most Asians have very little body hair, while I, like most Europeans, have rather hairy arms, the children want to know if I am some sort of monkey. It's a friendly greeting, but the kids crowding around to see the monkey make it impossible for me to see much. So I beat a hasty retreat. On the outskirts of Shanghai stands a large political prison. The communists themselves admit that some 600,000 people are held for opposing their power in China. How many people really are in prison, of course, is very difficult for any outsider to determine. These are the first films ever taken inside a communist prison by an American. These prisoners are operating foot-powered printing presses, like old sewing machines. They turn out books and magazines. As part of the penal reform system, all prisoners are given daily re-education sessions, what we call brainwashing here. Their fellow prisoners read them selections from the newspapers and from various Marxist publications. If they can convince the warden that they regret their crimes and want to help in the communist plans for building socialism, the warden can let them out of prison 10 or 15 years before their sentences are due to expire. So they pay very close and careful attention. Above is heaven, below are Hang Chau and Fu Chau, an old Chinese saying. Hang Chau is the site of the beautiful West Lake. Built on the orders of an emperor 2,300 years ago, its surface is covered with stone walkways and pagoda-roofed buildings. China's artists and poets came here in past centuries to gaze upon the lotus blossoms and goldfish. They inscribed their thoughts on the walls of the many little buildings around the lake. This is the tomb of the hero who strangled the tiger 800 years ago. Nearby is a large new hotel where foreign visitors and vacationing workers are staying. The favorite pastime on the West Lake is to relax while being rowed about in these hand-carved wooden boats. Entire Chinese families sit quietly sipping tea as they glide over the still waters. Needless to say, no motorboats or water skiing allowed here. Let's go for a boat ride. Our oarsman is an 18-year-old girl. She does this work 6 days a week and is a member of the West Lake Boatmen's Cooperative Society. A most lovely and enchanting place, but like the ski resort of Dairen, not typical of what is happening in the rapidly industrializing China of today. From Hangzhou on towards Canton in the far southeast of China. Several miles outside of Canton is one of the many villages that today form the commune system. This farm settlement of 1,600 people has stood here for hundreds of years. When the communists took over in 1949, the landlords were forced to distribute their lands to the peasants. Then, in 1954, while still holding title to their individual fields, China's 550 million peasants were organized into 650,000 cooperatives, and all the fields in each village were worked in common. Finally, in 1958, private ownership of the land was ended forever, as 26,000 commune organizations were established to administer to the 650,000 cooperative villages. Each commune may include from 10 to 100 such villages, and number up to 100,000 members. This was the most unpleasant moment of my assignment in China. I noticed these posters on the walls of the commune buildings. They announced the arrest and conviction of what were supposed to be Chiang Kai-shek saboteurs armed with American-made hand grenades. Turning quickly, I filmed the expressions on the farmers' faces. No one said a word, but their feelings were easily seen. The check under the name means the man has ceased to exist. Inside the town hall, a young intern from Canton is inoculating the children against an epidemic of nose and throat disease. Despite the vast illiteracy and deeply entrenched superstition that still exist in many parts of China, the adults appear enthusiastic about having their children inoculated, perhaps because injections appear similar to the acupuncture treatments which they have believed in for centuries. The children, however, just don't understand. Modern health measures have controlled cholera, typhoid, and the other epidemic diseases which once ravaged China to such a degree that foreign tourists are no longer required to be vaccinated against them. Necessary from both a humanitarian point of view and the need of an industrializing state to eliminate disease among its farmers and workers for efficiency reasons. But the resulting increase of 15 million people each year is bringing the communists new problems. In 12 years, they will have to feed, clothe, and shelter 180 million more people than the 670 million they already have to contend with. These old farmers have lived under 5 different forms of rule: the empire, the warlords, the nationalists, the Japanese occupation, and now communism. Although modern farming techniques have reached some communes, in this one the animals still run freely in the streets, and even in and out of the houses. The women wash clothes wherever there is a source of fairly clean water. The washing machines appearing in the cities in small numbers won't reach the countryside for many, many years. The harvest is almost ready. These young girls are out tilling the commune orchards. The rice fields were planted by hand, fertilized with animal and human fertilizer, and will be harvested by hand. This woman is cleaning irrigation ditches. She uses a new steel shovel, but still wears the black clothing and hair braided with a red ribbon that is traditional for this part of China. Intensive cultivation methods and the merging of the former tiny privately owned fields have greatly increased China's farm production, but their agriculture is still very backwards by modern standards, and there is much room for improvement. Draft animals, which are disappearing on many American farms, are in short supply here. It is still common to see people pulling plows where mules or oxen are not available. While the children play a card matching game similar to those played by children all over the world, I leave this typical commune village and go on to Canton, the largest city in southeast China. This is the Achung Hotel, tallest building in Canton. Canton, one of the last cities occupied by the communists, is said to have the least progressive reforms of any major city in China. It is a common sight to see women workers in the streets carrying even heavier loads than the men, as shown in this scene. Canton is divided by the Pearl River, which flows 100 miles down to the British Crown colony of Hong Kong. The tail end of a subtropical typhoon covers the Pearl River with driving sheets of rain. When the communists arrived in Canton, there were over 100,000 people so poor that they had no land and had to live on boats and rafts. Called the sampan dwellers after the little sampan boats they used as homes, these people were the lowest class in China, almost like the untouchables of India. Forbidden from setting foot on the shore without a special police permit, many of the sampan dwellers were born, lived, and died without ever standing on dry land. The communists found that these boat communities were a big problem. They constituted a health menace, made it difficult to educate and organize the people, and provided a breeding place for crime and prostitution. So the government started moving the sampan dwellers onto the land. Some have been transported thousands of miles to the west of China, where the new farmlands of Xinjiang are being opened up for settlement, while others have been moved into nearby communes. One of the new laws limits the number of people that can live in one boat. Still, 7 people are allowed in a space which averages only 4.5 by 10 feet. Entering a sampan to interview its inhabitants, I found 3 generations living side by side. Grandparents, their children, and their children's children all in an area of 4.5 by 10 feet. The women and girls gather twigs for the evening fires. In the past, it was very unusual for these people to eat any meat at all. But the strict rationing system started by the communists, although limiting everyone to a small amount, has enabled even the poor sampan people to get meat where they couldn't afford it before. The sampan children wear balsa wood floats in case they should fall into the river. The communists set up a cooperative for the river people, but only half of them have joined it. 80% of the river children, however, are brought to the free schoolhouse run by the communists. In a small wooden room built on a raft, sitting on plank benches, and reading their dog-eared textbooks by the light from a naked light bulb, the children of Canton sampan dwellers are learning to read and write. The people are constantly scrubbing their boats and clothing to keep dirt from gathering. In this canal leading off of the Pearl River are the homes of thousands of boat dwellers, a scene typical of China in the past, but one that is supposed to disappear according to the communist plans. Rushing back to Peking for the gigantic National Day parade. National Day, the celebration of the communist victory in 1949, takes place on October the 1st of every year. 10,000 foreigners have been invited into China at government expense to witness this spectacle. An Egyptian delegation walks through the courtyards of the Imperial Palace. A Japanese actress wears traditional dress for the parade. This is the Tian'anmen, the Gate of Heavenly Peace. Formerly the main entrance to the Forbidden City, it is now the Capitol building of Communist China. A 30-foot portrait of Mao Zedong adorns the front of the Gate of Heavenly Peace. In the reviewing stands are some of the 10,000 foreign guests. Tibetan monks, Japanese businessmen, Egyptian film producers, women delegates from India, and people from South America, Central America, Africa, and Afghanistan. The military starts off the parade. First to go past are the officers. They do a goose-step-like march. Following the officers come the enlisted men. The enlisted men ride in trucks while the officers walk. The reason? It is considered a great honor to march in this parade. In the background, portraits of Lenin and Stalin are hanging. Stalin's portrait is hardly ever seen in Russia anymore, but he is still honored in China. In contrast to previous years, no American equipment is displayed. In past parades, tanks and guns captured from Chiang Kai-shek or from our forces in Korea were shown off. Now only Chinese and Russian weapons are to be seen. Personnel carriers of a late design roll past pulling artillery pieces. Then come the tanks. These Russian-designed T-34s are now being built in China. Following them come 50 to 60-ton Lenin heavy tanks. Elements of China's 3,000-plane all-jet Air Force streak past. Russian-built Ilyushin medium-range jet bombers are also displayed. The military parade lasts only 30 minutes, and then the civilians begin to march past. First come the pioneers, children 8 to 15 years of age. The usual pioneer uniform is a white blouse with a red kerchief around the neck. But for this festive occasion, thousands of the girls are wearing cashmere sweaters. Much of the cashmere in the world is actually grown in Red China. The young men and boys carry paper flowers, an unusual sight if seen in the West, but in China an accepted custom. High above the scarlet banners hang portraits of Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, the philosophical founders of communism. When they wrote the Communist Manifesto about 100 years ago, they probably never imagined that 1/4 of the world's population would be following their philosophy only a century later. Russian flags are shown as a sign of Chinese-Russian friendship. Thousands of balloons are released by the marchers. With slogans attached to them, they float above the delegations from various factories who carry models of their production. The workers of the Dairen locomotive plant, workers from a chemical factory, and a rather ominous surprise. Zhou Enlai said that China had neither ICBMs nor atomic bombs, but here is a model of a 3-stage rocket. Is this just a plan, or is it already in production? With the Russians to help them, and with such world-renowned scientists of their own as Dr. Hsien-Tzu Fen of Caltech, they can probably build these terrible weapons if they want to invest the time and effort. On to more pleasant sights. Actors and dancers parade in front of the Gate of Heavenly Peace. Then thousands of doves are released in a gesture typical of communist celebrations, where the theme of peace and friendship is always stressed. At the end of the 3-hour parade, Mao Zedong, chairman of China's Communist Party, takes his traditional walk along the top of the Tiananmen, waving his hat to the crowds below. He is popularly called Uncle Mao by China's peasants. With him is the guest of honor, János Kadar, premier of Hungary since the Russians put down the uprising there in 1956. The crowds, dressed in a variety of national uniforms and European-style clothing, wave their paper flowers and pastel-colored flags as they celebrate Chinese communism's major holiday. By night, the streets of China's cities are aglow. Red and gold lights outline the major buildings as the National Day festivities continue into the evening. At the Gate of Heavenly Peace, a searchlight illuminates the giant portrait of Uncle Mao. In the streets, the people enjoy this 2-day vacation from their labors. The young Chinese seem to like Western-style entertainment. At least they dance the foxtrot. In an outdoor amphitheater, the traditional Dance of the Cowgirls from Sichuan province, followed by the most famous of all Peking operas, Revolt in Heaven. The Monkey King invades the palace of the Jade Emperor and defeats the gods. The city echoes to the thunderous roar of exploding skyrockets. The glowing reds, greens, golds, and blues silhouette the rooftops of the ancient Forbidden City. The dance of the Tibetan cavalry. Brandishing their sabers, they look very much like Russian Cossacks as they pretend to ride into battle for the Red victory. So many skyrockets, pinwheels, and Roman candles are being set off that the fireworks are stopped every 15 minutes to let the smoke clear from the city. The most fantastic of all sequences from the Peking opera, the battle with the giant wave. Everything in China, the art and tradition of the past, the growing agricultural, industrial, and military might of the present, the science and plans for the future. 1/4 of the Earth's population, all organized under a strong central dictatorship. The world watches as, like the giant wave, China continues to grow stronger and stronger.